renderforest.com.
Hi all, I'm Trisha Peach, host of the Peach Buzz, and I'm happy to see you here with me today. Some of you may have seen a recent coffee chat that I did with Ryan Frank, and I talked about something I'm very passionate about, how children and families with special needs may be a little bit more impacted during this time of COVID-19. Some churches are reopening at this point, meeting in person, and I want to talk about how this may be impacting special needs kids and their families more than we realize. First off, schedule and routine. I know this. I have a son with high functioning autism, and schedule and routine are everything. From the time he was very young, we get up at the same time, we do this at this time, this at this time. If you have a special needs child, you know how important routine is. Even a typical, neurologically typical child, schedule and routine is so key. And right now, their schedule and routine has been completely upended. Meaning, okay, they weren't going to school, they were having school at home, they weren't seeing their teachers in person. So all of that routine was completely upended. Now we're in the summer. So again, that's usually another schedule upheaval. So children with special needs sometimes struggle in the summer anyway. This is going to be a little more difficult. And then their sports and all their other activities were canceled. I know for myself, when my son was really young, we'd put him in some activities so that he could make friends and build social skills. So that part of the schedule was gone too. Boom, gone. The routine is so important, and that just completely gone. Their therapists were canceled. Some of them were seeing therapists or a counselor or visits with that special grandma, and all of that was gone. So it was disorienting, upsetting, nerve-wracking. Now we're going back into churches, some are, and when they're meeting in person, you have a special needs child, and they may not be going downstairs or to the other wing for kids' church. They may not, the routine at church is different too. And we have to understand, especially younger children with special needs, there may be a meltdown or two. There might be some issues, and we should be ready for that, prepared for that, and very understanding, because things are different. Also, that child, they see their friends and want to go over and give them a hug. They are not going to understand being told, no, you can't go within 6 feet of your friend. So we have to be prepared to deal with that as well. One kid's church, I know, they have the chairs 6 feet apart, and they are meeting, but it's still hard because kids are kids, and they see each other and they're going to run up and give a great big hug. Just need to be aware of that. So how can church leaders help with the routine side of this? Well, number one, we need to set a new routine, whatever that is. You're setting a routine, and you need to stick with it. And I know that's hard in this time right now. We're still trying to figure things out. But routine is so important to all children, but especially those that may struggle with a special need. Really, really important right now, more than anything, is that if you set an expectation, if you make a promise, if you even say something's going to happen, you need to move heaven and earth to make that happen. Because right now, there's all of this upheaval. What they expected isn't happening. So for a child that comes to your church, if you say next week you're all going to have this great coloring sheet, you better make sure it happens. It may be small to you and me. You say, oh, it's just a coloring sheet, but it's not to a child that's looking for some stability. And especially at church, they need to know, okay, the rest of the world is kind of in chaos. Nothing's what is expected. But when I go to church, when they tell me something's going to happen, it's going to happen. When I'm at church, when they make a promise, they keep it. And I like to make that distinction. Okay, things aren't what we expect sometimes at home or at school, but God always keeps his promises, and God doesn't change, and God's promises to you are still in effect. And I think all children need to know that. We adults need to know that what God has said is still in full effect. So we can help them in a world that's spinning with uncertainty, that we help each child find a place to be in community, a place of love and stability. So there still need to be rules and protocols in place. Explain those and try to stick to it. If you're changing it every week, you may have meltdowns every week, which that's definitely a problem. As much as you can, try to provide routines, and that would be for parents of children with special needs as well. This is a time where they're craving structure and routine. The more you can give them, the better, to make their lives, okay, I can count on this. I can count on this. So these things are all changing, but I can count on this. So we point them to what doesn't change. Like, I'm going to love you no matter what. I love you, and that's not going to change. God loves you, and that's not going to change. And having dinner at the same time every night, things they can count on, because it can make children very fearful. All this upheaval, they're still trying to process what is going to stay the same in my life and what is going to change. It can be a good conversation of everything changes in life. Everything changes except, enlist the love of God, the promises of God, God's plan, that kind of thing, and the love that we as your parents have for you and we as your children's leaders have for you. So number 2, first is the schedule upheaval. The second major struggle facing all kids, but especially kids with special needs, is lack of crucial socialization. You may say, well, that's not, how important is that in comparison with this very scary virus? It's very important. It's so crucial. I remember times when my son I'd be praying, God, give him one good friend, just one good friend at school, just one would make all the difference. And it did. Now, he just had his 17th birthday, and I had packed out with a house full of his friends, but him making friends is so important, and especially to a child that may struggle with socialization or special needs, those friendships are so important because they need to grow spiritually, they need to grow socially, they need to grow academically. So there's all these different things. Socialization is still important, and I may take some flack for this, but I'm going to say it. A video cannot take the place of a flesh and blood person. Video is great. Hi, I like seeing all of you. A video cannot take the place of a flesh and blood person. We need social interaction as human beings. And I know we have to balance that with flattening out the curve of COVID-19. I really think it can be detrimental for children to not have any interaction with their friends or teachers or counselors or therapists. When all we can do is online, then that's what we do. We do the best that we can with online. But if your church is reopening and these kids are entering, you can provide a very needed social interaction. As kids leaders, we have to remember it may be the only social interaction they have right now. A lot of clubs are shut down for the summer. Where I live, the pool is shut down. A lot of lessons are shut down. Beaches are shut down. Definitely like summer little league and sports stuff are shut down, but one place they can still go is church, and hopefully to meet safely. We use hand sanitizer, the water fountain's shut down, everybody's 6 feet apart, but it's still a place hopefully where they can find love and social interaction and meet with their friends. I think what we as kids leaders need to understand is they may be very starved for time with their friends. So we probably need to just accept that if that's the only place where they're interacting with teachers, adult leaders, and kids, we may need to allow for more time for socialization in there as well. I think they're going to be craving that time of seeing their teachers and seeing their friends and interacting. So socialization is huge. The church needs to provide what it can when you're reopening safely to interact. 3, we're going to have to deal with some new services. As we said, new routines, new everything. Everything's new right now. Lack of socialization. Another thing they're going to have to be dealing with now is family services. For a lot of churches are not reopening kids' church, and they're going with family services. This can be a problem for special needs children and their families if the congregation has not been trained to deal with it. What do I mean by that? What I mean is it is a totally different thing if you have a child having a meltdown in the middle of the service and it's the main service, the adult service, and we have this expectation, remember that word, expectation, that everybody's going to sit there and be quiet. I hate that anyway. Sit there and be quiet, sit there, be quiet, sit there, be quiet, sit there and be quiet. And then we wonder why our adults are only good at sitting there and being quiet. When you have kids in the service, it's going to be louder. It's going to be louder. You end up having babies crying. You have a child start to have a meltdown, even a typical child. So I know what a lot of churches are doing. You have coloring sheets, you have busy bags, you have whatever it takes. But I think we as adults, we got to be the grown-ups here. We need to be the adults and realize this is going to be a louder service. I think we're going to have to get over it. And the expectation needs to be set with the congregation saying, you know, this is going to be messier. This is going to be a louder service. You're going to have to be patient. I noticed our pastor explained that to our congregation, and it was kind of like, oh, okay. Because for a while we met with family service and people loved it. That was the thing. We had kids' elements in that service, and we made it a truly family service. By the way, this is off the subject, but don't call it a family service if you just tell the kids to sit down and be quiet and you don't change a thing about the service. That's an adult service, and you shove the kids in there and are expecting them to act like adults. That's not a family service. A family service will have elements for the kids and will welcome them in, not barely tolerate them. So if you're having family services, you need to welcome those kids in. So you've got the kids in there. You need to set the expectation. This is not going to be a normal service. These are family services. It's going to be louder. And then you have the option for people to meet at home. If they want to watch it online at home, they can do that. But you need to set an expectation. If you're doing family services, you don't want parents of kids with special needs to feel like they can't come to church, because they may feel like, well, if that's what we're doing, then I can't even come to church. You need to set your expectation that this is not going to be a silent service. If you can't deal with it, watch one at home. That's the way it's got to be. So you need to work on those family services for the sake of kids and families with special needs, and also for the sake of your typical kids. One of the most beautiful things I ever saw at our church, we had a mom that came to church, 2 children with very severe special needs, and one of them very, very severe. And one of our leaders just walked the boy, he had a wheelchair, walked him up and down the hall so he could listen to the praise and worship music. The child seemed to love it. And the mom cried. She said it was the first time she'd been able to go to church in a decade. So if we're doing family services, it needs to be for everyone. Okay, and number 4, families of children with special needs right now are dealing with a major problem, which is the lack of their specialists. And that includes occupational therapy, their hands-on therapy. Some of them still haven't been able to go back to that, or they had an aide at the school and they don't have that at home. So a lot of that support wasn't there. If they were seeing a therapist, any of that. So they had this support system, or hopefully did, a support structure with the school and with their neighborhood. That's gone in some instances. We hope that'll be back soon. They need us to get around them and let them know we still love them. They need their church to know we are still here and we do still care. Even if you aren't open yet meeting physically, I've heard of great ideas of leaving baskets on the doorstep. But even just understanding that for these kids and for their families, that's a huge loss. Not having their aide or their therapist or whatever other help that they had, the support system that they had may not be there. And maybe grandma and grandpa were helping several days a week and don't have that either. So the loss of that support structure, again, that can be devastating. So when they come to church, they need to know, okay, that has changed, but we're here and we love you and we're still here for you. That's really important. And last but not least, number 5, a reason why kids with special needs and their families might be having a harder time right now than some of the rest of us. And that could be fear of COVID-19. Coronavirus has wreaked havoc all over our planet. But what we need to keep in mind is it is especially dangerous for people with pre-existing conditions. And depending on what the pre-existing condition is, a child may have some of these pre-existing conditions. And that may mean that the best option for them is to stay home and watch it online for safety's sake. However, I think we have to just be cognizant of the fact that some families are struggling with this. When do we come back to church? In person? Now? Do we wait? Do we not? Do we keep watching it at home? And we need to acknowledge that some people need a little more time. They need a little more time. If they have a child with special needs, they're probably seeing, okay, the underlying condition with this or not, and then being able to watch how you're doing church and maybe even some reassurance from you that we welcome you and your child here at church. Even if our services are a little loud, we want you here. So this is the 5 major things that families with special needs are dealing with and some ways that we can help. But I just want to say thank you for serving Jesus and his kids. Thank you for all that you do. And you know, God sees it. I'm so proud of you. You're amazing. You can do this. And for parents of children with special needs, you can do this. Don't give up. We're going to get through this together. We love you. We'll see you next week on the Peach Buzz. Bye-bye.